This video is brought to you via Drug Mounting. Chatterfang vs Tuvasa, Hamza and Maelstrom Wanderer. 2-lander with no ramp and some pretty heavy cards. I want to try and get into ramp in this deck, don't want to be struggling on mana. So of course we get into what is effectively almost not a 1-lander, because this actually can't tap for any colours until we get into a swamp. Yeah, we're going down a card then. Alright, 4 lands with a turn 2 Bitter Blossom isn't terrible. Yeah, we'll keep that one. Get rid of a forest, should have enough green mana with the Gaia's Cradle. Couple of green mana from turn 1 onwards for the Bamp player, playing an Elvish Mystic. We go back up to 7 cards at the beginning of the turn, and draw into an Ivy Lane Denizen. Seeing the other 2 colours required from Tuvasa, and swinging in quite aggressively with the Elvish Mystic. At least projecting to all of us that he wants rid of the Maelstrom Wanderer first, maybe, which is probably a good idea. We draw into Lightning Greaves, so worst case scenario we can get that down again as well, but this time it is a swamp into the Bitter Blossom. First piece of ramp from the Wanderer is a Gruul Signet. Hamza's first spell is Weathered Wayfarer. It's Rhystic Study from the Bamp player. Spreading the damage, this time Elvish Mystic swings in towards us. So unfortunately I think Bitter Blossom and Gaia's Cradle is going to attract more attention towards us when Maelstrom Wanderer's at the board. We need to be dealing with Maelstrom Wanderer as quickly as possible, but I think we're going to draw some of our opponent's ire, unfortunately. Drawing to Pact of the Serpent with 2 tribes in play after our commander hits, so I think we do go for our commander here. So it's Gaia's Cradle for just 1 mana at the moment. And we'll play out our commander without any protection whatsoever, and unfortunately giving our opponent a card with the Rhystic Study, which I don't often recommend. Noteworthy that both Maelstrom Wanderer and Tuvasa have forests in play for the Chatterfang. Does have forest walks, only a matter of time before Hamza gets one in as well. A Ranger's Path also allowing Tuvasa to draw, so yeah, multiple threats at the board at this point. Luckily this is a combo deck and we have a combo piece in hand, so might be able to win via that means if we're lucky. Weathered Wayfarer being activated by Hamza and grabs a Gaia's Cradle of his own. And after that it is 3 for 3 on the Rhystic Study. Gaia Sage going to enter play and draw another card. So we're just hoping for a Tuvasa with no removal afterwards at this point. Do manage to make a 4th land. Yep, and that's usually what happens when you play out Chatterfang. See a Swords to Plowshares, removing that straight away, so back into the command zone it goes. Should have played a bit more slowly and got the Lightning Greaves out first, although there's every chance an Enchantress player has removal for that as well, and we are up against 3 green players. Tuvasa enters play, so we could drop ourselves a Yawgmoth next turn and blow up the Tuvasa in response. The Dork swings in towards the Maelstrom Wanderer. I think we're best just slowing down here because we are drawing our opponent cards with the Rhystic Study. Cabal Coffer's probably one of the worst lands we could have hoped for, but maybe someone will drop a Yavin Maya so that we can actually tap this down for green mana. We do have 2 swamps, so any swamps that we drop from now on will make the Cabal Coffers actually worth something. So I think it's just the Lightning Greaves, and we'll pay into the Rhystic Study. Might even have to go for Pact of the Serpent next turn to draw 3 cards. Obviously name Fairy with that. Sanctum of Eternities from Maelstrom Wanderer. So they are 1 mana shy at the moment, but we'll be able to bounce and replay Maelstrom Wanderer over the course of the game. 4 cards in hand at the moment. And playing out a Dockside Extortionist. So not the best Dockside they could have played, especially against an Enchantress player. They didn't pay for the Rhystic Study tax there either. That does allow them into the Maelstrom Wanderer this turn though, which I'm assuming is the plan here. So 3 cards in hand, casting Maelstrom Wanderer, allowing Rhystic Study to draw again. And the Enchantress player should have decent answers for Maelstrom Wanderer. Pacifism effects and the like is the best way to deal with the Wanderer, because our opponent will want to bounce it back to hand or replay it from the command zone over and over again. Problem is they have Sanctum of Eternity, so that will need dealing with as well. Shaman of the Forgotten Ways. Cascading does count as casting, so Rhystic Study continuing to do work. And then it's a 3 visits after that. Holding up a tropical island from the 3 visits, and all their creatures do have haste now, so they go into combat, and I think correctly going in at the Bamp player. Swinging in a 2-3 over there as well. As it stands now though, they can't pay for the command attacks on the Maelstrom Wanderer, and there is the first forest from Hamza, so Forest Walk is switched on throughout the entire game. Mangara the Diplomat being cast into the study, and once again our opponent being allowed to draw. Mangara entering evokes the Gaia Sage, so that will start tapping for mana. So hopefully they don't play a 2-mana spell into that study. Jukai Naturalist is an enchantment creature being cast into the Tuvasa. We'll draw the first card from that. Following that up with Hyena Umbra, and that is enchanting the Tuvasa. Drew the Celestia player card off Mangara, and that's perfect. Imprisoned in the Moon or Song of the Dryad, something like that, is really good for the Maelstrom Wanderer. Only have 3 cards in hand over there as well. And yeah, the card draw really benefiting. Down to 8 cards in hand, a Birds of Paradise into play as well. Not holding up any removal at least. And then the Tuvasa landing 6 points of first strike commander damage over at the Maelstrom Wanderer player, but decides to chump block with the Dockside Extortionist. Discarding a Krufix's Insight to hand size. And there is a Solemn Simulacrum for us, which is tempting, but our opponents are shield down for our commander now. I wouldn't have thought the Maelstrom Wanderer player would drop too many Wraths, because you don't really want to cascade into Wraths, but yeah, maybe they've got Blasphemous Act or something they'll cast here. I think seeing as how we're missing land drops, we just have to go for the Solemn Simulacrum here, unfortunately. And we will pay into the Rhystic Study. At least going really slow on our opponents will make us look like less of a threat. And we grab a Swamp to put ourselves a step closer to switching on the Cabal Coffers. Noteworthy that we have mixed up the basics, because Field of the Dead is in here. Sunbird's Invocation from the Maelstrom Wanderer player, so if you're going to lose your commander, at least that's a good means of getting some similar card advantage. Hardened Scales for Hamza, and actually paying into the Rhystic Study this time. And after that, tapping out into Ajani the Great-Hearted. So about to dump a bunch of plus counters on things. Means that now the Gaia Sage is going to tap for 3 mana in total. And even with all their creatures having Vigilance, they decide to just hold back and not swing in at all. Not sure why you wouldn't even swing in at the... Should probably have swung in with the Mangara at least, just to gain some life. Tuvasa not done going off yet, playing a Smothering Tithe. Followed by a Generous Gift onto our Gaia's Cradle, so yeah, I'll be very surprised if we actually get to do anything this game, unfortunately. Does trigger the Smothering Tithe because Mangara drew a card, so you get another treasure token there. Pretty stuck on green mana now at this point, and just cannot draw into lands for some reason. We're on turn 6 now and drew into a Beast Within. So annoyingly, I think it has to be tap down Cabal Coffers, makes us 3 mana, and we'll go for Pact of the Serpent, targeting ourselves, and then we will pay into the Rhystic Study. Obviously going to name Fairy here, so we'll draw 4 and lose 4, which activates more Smothering Tithes, and in all that we only get into 1 other land. It is a swamp at least. But what we can do here is shock it in and then go for the Vamp Tutor for an Urborg, and maybe that'll help us get back into the game, so just holding up the Vamp Tutor, we'll pass at that. Sanctum of Eternity is going to bounce the Maelstrom Wanderer back to hand. I didn't realise that this was still classed as your commander if it's a land, but apparently that works. Our opponent should tap it down for mana before it gets bounced, because if they don't make a land here after this, then it's the difference between them playing the Maelstrom Wanderer and not. Luckily they did have a land in Carplucent Forest, so no doubt getting their commander back into play here. They will draw another card with Rhystic Study. Triggers the Sunbird's Invocation, and of course they get the 2 Cascades as well. Don't think I've ever had a game in which Rhystic Study has been as disrespected as this. Second spell is cast, triggering the Mangara and the Rhystic Study again. It is Nature's Law was the first Cascade, and of course Mangara drawing will trigger the Smothering Tithe for another treasure token. And just cascading into yet more ramp, Sakura Tribe Elder this time. So maybe has the ramp to crazy strong stuff ratio a bit off here, or could just be getting really unlucky. But there manages to get into a Drakuseth with the Sunbird's Invocation, and that will have haste, so gets to throw around, I think it's 4 damage and a couple of lightning bolts. Now Tuvasa is doing something in response. It is a Beast Within onto the Drakuseth, so there's plenty of removal this game. Some of which, well actually 3 of which out of 4 haven't been enchantment based, strangely. But the instant speed helping our opponent out here, so a 3/3 beast token with haste. Wondering if our opponents are going to start paying into the Rhystic Study at any point, because this will keep happening until they do. And then not even swinging in with the Maelstrom Wanderer. Hamza, Guardian of Arashin, coming into play for the first time here. Plenty of creatures with plus counters on them. Following that up with a Conclave Mentor. Continuing to not pay into the Rhystic Study, so not going to feel as bad about playing Vamp Tutor into the Rhystic Study and not paying for it. We're hardly going to make a dint in the damage that thing's been doing. After that, playing Loyal Guardian. And we see the Loyal Guardian trigger there after they take down the Ajani. Getting a massive army into play at this point, all of which has Vigilance, so unlike last turn, I would assume they'd swing in here. They should have swung in last turn as well, and this player should have been pressuring the Bant player also. Need to be willing to lose your stuff to get rid of a player sometimes, unfortunately. Okay, swinging in at us with the Gaia Sage for some strange reason. I don't know what we've done to actually make our opponents worry. Wow. And Mangara going in at Maelstrom Wanderer. So just trying to spread the damage out. Only a 9-9 swinging in at the Bant player. Yeah, I think there's some strange risk assessments going on here. Birds of Paradise going in the way of the 9-9. I will throw a 1-1 away to the Gaia Sage. And then it's the old chump and sacrifice with Sakura Tribe Elder, so our opponent will not gain 10 life from Mangara. I think that's 14, 16 damage that's been missed from the Mangara so far. Now time to see how much damage Tuvasa can do with 12 cards in hand. Thassa, God of the Sea, will draw a card, thanks to Tuvasa. After that, it's Sigil of the Empty Throne, which will trigger Mangara for more card draw. Getting the first Angel from Sigil of the Empty Throne after casting a Rancor, which will put +2 onto the power of and trample onto Tuvasa. And then swinging in at us. Yeah, some really weird things going on this game. I think we just block a little bit of commander damage with the Solemn Simulacrum here, to be honest. Even if we block with everything, we couldn't get the Totem Armor to fall off, so yeah, this is fine. So we take 9 points of commander damage. In response, I'll test my opponent for a counter spell here. They've got 9 cards in hand, about to go up to 10. Allows that to resolve though, so we just hope that we don't see a wheel at this point. And an Urborg for us into hand. Or on top of our library, we'll draw it with the Solemn. Enchantress's Presence, followed by Dryad of the Elysian Grove, so an Angel from the Sigil and a card draw from the Presence. So Tuvasa is a 13-13 at this point, and we need to bear in mind that they can make it unblockable with the Thassa, leaving up 5 treasure tokens with 7 cards in hand. Bitter Blossom continuing to ping us, of course. A Parallel Lives for us, so drawing into all of our 4 drops this game, but not managing to draw into any lands, annoyingly. So when we drop the Urborg Tomb of Yawgmoth, we'll have 9 mana in total, which means it's 4 into Pest Infestation. I'd rather have our commander down when we do this, but is it really going to matter at this point? Maybe just casting our commander and holding up Beast Within is fine, and then we can go for a big Pest Infestation next turn, if we actually survive. Obviously could have gone for a Damnation with the tutor, but after the terrible attacks that have been made this game, I'm not going to help out my opponents by wiping the board here. We've done little to nothing, and for some reason we seem to be a bit of a target. So we've got 4 mana left in total, seeing as how we're the only ones paying into Rhystic Study. Yeah, I mean our opponent, we're just encouraging our opponent over to us no matter what we do. So let's just pay into the study here. Lightning Greaves successfully goes on to the Chatterfang, and I'm just going to hold on to the Beast Within at this point. Anything we do is going to encourage the Bant player to swing in over at us, and our opponent's terrified of the Chatterfang anyway apparently, so maybe they're going to swing in at us regardless, but we'll hold back anyway and try not to do anything that would enrage him. Momentous Fall, sacrificing the commander and drawing cards equal to the power, which is 7, with the Maelstrom Wanderer. Obviously that triggers the Sunbird's Invocation and the study again. Sunbird's Invocation takes them into a Thran Dynamo, triggering Mangara this time. Then casting the Maelstrom Wanderer. They're not going to be able to cascade into Blasphemous Act with this, but I don't know what board wipes our opponent has, if he is in fact after a board wipe. Cascading first into Team of Sabertooth, and then it is Vandal Blast after that, going after our Lightning Greaves. Well, if anyone can get rid of Tuvasa here, it's the Celestia player. Whether he actually does it or not is anyone's guess. Might be able to get flying or trample on stuff and really buff these things by a massive amount. Playing a Gavany Township, so that'll be 3 plus counters from this thing, thanks to both Hardened Scales and the Conclave. Ajani Goldmane is multiple plus counters as well, +3 from the green Ajani. And then minusing down on the original Ajani, so 3 plus counters and vigilance on all of his creatures. So can't quite go wide on the BAMP player at the moment. Loyal Guardian triggers for more plus counters. So what should be happening here is all of these should be swinging in towards the BAMP player. There's been a lot of damage missed on the BAMP player this game, and if it wasn't for that, our opponent might be able to go wide here. But yeah, been really just playing into Tuvasa's hand this game. But finally, looks like deciding to deal a whole bunch of damage over there. This all depends on whether or not Tuvasa has. Might have mass bounce or mass exile, something like that in response, some kind of instant speed board wipe. Gavany Township being activated as well, that is during the attack phase. There's no trample on any of these things. Tuvasa going through to blocks, which suggests there is no settle the wreckage or anything. It's noteworthy that this has life links, so 2 life will be gained there. But I don't think our opponent's going wide regardless. But yeah, if the Maelstrom Wanderer had swung in, there would be one less blocker over here. Oh, and I said no trample. There is a trample on the Loyal Guardian at least, which could make a massive difference actually. Yeah, that having trample could make all the difference and get through to our opponent here. Alright, and amazingly, the Tuvasa player goes down, so that totally turns the game around. I'm really glad that I didn't go for the board wipe now and force my opponents to deal with Tuvasa instead of... I think a board wipe, for creatures at least, would have played straight into Tuvasa's hand there. And we do stand to actually have our commander survive through this turn cycle now. Although this thing does tap for 20 mana. And there's a Pathraiser Ulamog. So Annihilator 3, and can't be blocked except by 3 or more creatures, a 9/9. And then leaving it with 5 cards in hand and 72 life. Be intrigued to see if we actually manage to draw into a creature here, making our first Squirrel token on turn 8. And there is a Skyclave Relic. It's mana, but it's not a land, unfortunately. The tokens from this thing come in tapped as well, so we would get 2 more mana if we kicked it, and we'd get 2 squirrels as well, which might be relevant. So we've still only got 9 mana, annoyingly, with a bunch of 4-drops in hand. Don't really see what we're going to do here, annoyingly. We need to hold up this 3 mana for the Beast Within, which kind of means that we have to play just black spells here. Maybe we do just go for the Skyclave Relic. That will get us more blockers into play, and yeah, I'm not sure where this player's going to swing in, to be honest. We could blow up the Loyal Guardian and take the Annihilator 3 from this. Yeah, let's go Skyclave Relic. I mean, it's not exactly a real game for us, this game, is it? Thanks to the terrible draws that we've had and the distinct lack of mana. So Skyclave Relic kicked will introduce a couple of tapped copies of itself, and those are tokens, so it makes more squirrel tokens. We can use this to activate the Chatterfang if we want to. Obviously we'd rather be doing all this with the parallel lives in play, but we are still in catch-up mode, unfortunately. So yeah, we're holding up the Beast Within, and it's likely either going on the Loyal Guardian or the Pathraiser. I think Chatterfang has to finish off the Ajani that can put more plus counters on things. They do have a forest, so we go straight through there. Kodama of the East Tree, be interesting to see with a full grip how much damage Kodama can do. Sunbird's into Atali, so Maelstrom starting to go off finally. Mangara draws, then Rishkar's Expertise. So going to draw 7. Yeah, the highest power is 7. Obviously Sunbird's Invocation we have to deal with first. That is a pretty scary one. Warstorm Surge. They only have 4 mana available at the moment though. And we do have Kodama to think about as well. They could make more mana with that. So that is a Bloodbraid Elf for some more Cascade. They get a Lightning Bolt as well. So that could deal with our commander. Instead, start piling damage onto the Pathraiser. So after all of this, it might be that the Teamer player deals with the Hamza quite nicely, or at least some of the creatures over there. And then we can point our Beast Within over at Warstorm Surge. We're ultimately in our opponent's hands, as we have been the whole game, and just hope that they make some decisions in our favour. Casting Vastwood Surge after that. Not sure if our opponent... I think our opponent might have whiffed on the Bloodbraid Elf, actually. Haven't seen anything cascaded into off that. Anyway, Vastwood Surge, they got Sunbird's Invocation into Gwenna, Eyes of Gaia. And of course that triggers Kodama. 11 cards in hand at the moment. And the Warstorm Surge goes at the Ajani the Greathearted. Throwing down a free Sol Ring, I think that was from the Kodama. It's not clear what's coming down with Kodama. I think they got a couple of lands in there as well. Anyway, after all the stack is emptied, it is a Sol Ring and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6 lands in play. Although one of them is a Castle Garenbrig, so that can make 6 mana. Playing the Great Henge with the Sunbird's Invocation in play still. And that takes him into Nyxbloom Ancient, which is exactly what he would want here, I imagine. So that triggers the Gwenna. And they didn't tap that down for mana before having it on tap, curiously. So Warstorm Surge continuing to trigger. You would think it would get pointed at the Pathraiser. Instead it is pointed directly at the Hamza player. And Kodama got down a Zendikar Resurgent. And Kodama triggers again when the Henge enters. So after that we see an Uro, Titan of Nature's Wrath. That will sacrifice itself, but they'll gain 3 and draw. Draw from the Uro and draw from the Great Henge as well. So Warstorm Surge should have gone on the stack first because they'll get a buff onto this from the Great Henge plus counter. But again, piling damage from Warstorm Surge onto the Celestia player. They must fancy their odds of being able to get rid of them this turn, which would be impressive. So they're straight back up to 7 cards in hand. Must have got in a land with Uro because Kodama triggers again. And I think it was the Fabled Passage. Now it's Sarkhan's Unsealing, so another Warstorm Surge effectively. And that just takes them into a Mind Stone off the Invocation, which triggers Kodama, and I think they got down Lightning Greaves there. They've got haste on all their stuff anyway. Kodama triggers on the Unsealing entry, but don't think they got anything off that. 4 cards in hand, and the Sol Ring taps for 6 mana. Now it's more card advantage in See the Unwritten, and that is the Invocation into the Silverback Elder. So draw a card from Zendikar Resurgent, untap the Gwenna, which they're not tapping for mana in between it being untapped. Sarkhan's Unsealing, again being pointed at Hamza directly, the Hamza player. I don't know if there's some kind of deal made here. I suppose if the Pathraiser Ulamog does stay in play, it'll come in at me as opposed to this player now, thanks to all these blockers in place, so maybe that's what the Teamer player is thinking. I dare say our Bitter Blossom's finally going to go down to the Silverback Elder. Wow, really? And oh Jesus, after all that I sit through this whole damn game. Hamza just decides to scoop for some reason. Yeah, the Hamza player asked if it was infinite. It's not infinite, there's nothing infinite about this, it's just a crazy strong turn. Anyway, Warstorm Surge now being pointed at us, so now is the time to think about Beast Within, I think. Problem is they're going to have haste on whatever it is that we go after. I think Beast Within onto Warstorm Surge is fine though, because they're just going to continue to do crazy stuff. Not sure what we can do here. I was hoping that Hamza would actually stick it out so that we could have another turn cycle. Anyway, the token entering triggers the Kodama. Don't think they got anything in off that though. Off Warstorm Surge we go down to 13, so they're probably, with all this trample and stuff, probably going wide on us. Actually think they've only got 1 trampler in the Nyxbloom. Anyhow, See the Unwritten finally resolving here. And then slamming down a Titan of Industry, so that is another trampler. I think if this goes on for much longer we'll have to concede, because I don't see that we're doing much against our opponent here. Real shame that Hamza decided to scoop there, because I've said it on this channel a million times, it just warps games. I won't keep flogging this dead horse. Titan of Industry blows up the Bitter Blossom and they gain 5 life. And now getting down Inferno Titan. I think I'll just fast forward the game at this point because it is taking a while. So yeah, you can watch the gameplay if you want or skip forwards and see what ultimately happens, but our opponent's got us here. Alright, and eventually our opponent decides to get there. Yeah, pretty terrible game for us. If we'd managed to make it a full turn cycle without any interaction, we might have been able to limp our way through that game, but with the little to no ramp that we managed to get into that game, yeah, it was just a pretty rough one for us, especially up against some powerful opponents there. Hamza doing some work in the end as well, which was really cool to see. Just a shame that he decided to scoop on us, and I dare say that Maelstrom Wanderer would have gone wide on both of us anyway. But we'll never know now. Anyway, hopefully you all enjoyed this game. It was a nice interactive one for all of you to watch, so be sure to leave it a thumbs up if you did, and consider donating on Patreon as well. I'm tribalkai. Thank you for watching.